Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC Football Podcast. My name's Joey Weaver. He is Mike McDaniel. Mike, it has been a couple weeks. Happy New Year. How you doing? You ready to recap on some games and talk some ACC news?
Happy New Year. Yeah, we were basically intending on recording last week. I was working nights for SI all week. It was just too crazy. We were trying to record during the day, and then we were trying to record at night, like after I got off work, and it was just too much going on. And it's hard for you and I to record past midnight during the week. Like, it's just a tough thing to do with kids and parental duties, and hard thing to do. We can pull that off on Saturday nights during the football season. It's hard to do during the week. So,
yeah, I don't think that one requires too much explanation. I think people probably get that one.
Yeah, so we were planning on being back a lot sooner than this. I know it's been basically a little over a week now since ACC bowl season ended. Sorry for the brief delay, but that's kind of what happened there.
Yep. But yeah, as mentioned, I mean, now we are live here, youtube.com/@the-ACC Football Podcast. It is a few minutes before 11:30 Eastern on Sunday, January the 12th. We are here. We're going to recap. We got 3 more games we got to recap to kind of fully polish off bowl season and move into the off season. We've got some news we're going to hit on. We'll probably talk a little bit about the upcoming national championship game here, but before the episode is over. Full discretion here. My house has a stomach bug quickly running through it, so we might be on borrowed time here on my end. That applies to both my children and myself. So if something needs to change during the show, you might see me run out of here kind of quickly. But that would be good for content, right?
It'd be great for content. Nothing like recording a podcast solo. I haven't done that in a while. So we'll get back to the swing of things. We got season recaps coming up with all the individuals, and we don't know if we'll be able to record all of those together. So it's good to get back in the mix. Little neck crack situation for me if the time comes. And at least I got the comment section. We got a lot of listeners in with us tonight, so that's good.
There you go. Yeah, we do have a lot of people here in the comments with us, youtube.com/@the-ACC Football Podcast. Really appreciate them joining. Please hit that subscribe button if you have not already. That would really, really help us out a lot. Yep. Please hit that like button if you like what you're hearing, or if you don't like what you're hearing, but you want to come back and hear more of it anyways. We would appreciate that. Mike, I think that's all I've got until we start jumping into a couple of these games.
Yeah, are we doing just a little behind the scenes show thing here? Are we doing timestamps tonight for Scott?
I wasn't.
Should we? I'll just do it live. We'll just.
I'm sure Scott would like that. Yeah.
In the middle of the podcast, I'll just yell, "Hey, Scott, 3 minutes." Okay.
That's right. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. We can do that. This whole thing is kind of a Roback Rapid Recap. It's not a formal one. We're not going to set a timer, but it's all kind of a Roback Rapid Recap. As a reminder, roback.com, use promo code GOACC20 at checkout for 20% off your first order. I love my Roback. You'll love yours. Polos, jackets, all sort of athleisure wear. Looks great. They've got the college collection with a number of different schools throughout the ACC. I know Virginia Tech, SMU. I think Florida State might be on there.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, go check all that out. Roback.com. Use promo code GOACC20 at checkout for 20% off your next order. Mike, let's jump in. We'll just kind of go in chronological order here. Again, Tuesday, December the 31st, the Louisville Cardinals 35, the Washington Huskies 34 in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. This was an incredibly fun game, honestly.
Shit. Yeah, bad shit. Game was
very much back and forth. It was tied at halftime. Louisville kind of took control in the third quarter and then just left the door open a little bit for Washington to come back in the final 5 minutes. Both teams, I think, playing backup quarterbacks here. We mentioned on the preview that both Tyler Shuck and the name's now escaping me, Pierce Clarkson, were going to be unavailable for Louisville here. Harrison Bailey comes in, the transfer from Tennessee. He throws for 164 yards and 3 touchdowns, no picks. He wasn't awesome. I understand why he wasn't the starter, but he was plenty good enough for this game. Thought he played well. Isaac Brown had a pretty good day as well for Louisville running the ball. Duke Watson was okay. Washington's quarterback, Damon Williams, he was exciting. He was fun to watch.
Yes.
This one came down, Washington did get the benefit of some whistles here late in this game that kind of helped to extend it. And ultimately they end up scoring. They go for 2 with under 10 seconds left, and they don't get it. And And I would say that was it, except Louisville got multiple unsportsmanlike penalties that basically put
Yeah.
Washington in position to go for an onside kick to where if they'd recovered it, they were in field goal range to win the game. So that got a little bit dicey there for a second, but Louisville does hold on 35-34, and they give the ACC its second win of bowl season.
Good thing they got the second one here, because we'll recap a couple more in a second where it didn't go so well for the ACC. Damon Williams balled out here. He was basically Washington's entire offense. Giles Jackson was incredible in this game at receiver, 11 for 161, and caught all 4 of those touchdown passes from Damon Williams. He was really, really good. Yeah, entertaining game. Louisville could not put Washington away. They had their opportunities to do so. They couldn't do it. And as Scott aptly pointed out, right as this game went final, Louisville was a 1-point favorite and still couldn't cover. So here we go. That is a push, ladies and gentlemen. That is a push for our bets there.
And because I'm a really well-prepared podcast host, I believe the stat that I heard was that this game finished the run for Louisville. They are the only team in the entire country this year that scored at least 24 points in every game that they played. And I don't know what that's worth, but it's kind of cool. And
it's worth going 9-4. That's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty good in the ACC. The fact that they put up 24 against Notre Dame and, got 45 up against Miami. I mean, 27 against SMU. Could have gone a lot worse if you're Louisville. This was ultimately a pretty good year, and I think you feel good about Jeff Brom getting that first bowl win.
Yeah, definitely. And, they were one of 2 ACC bowl wins this year. So there you go. Yep. I don't know what that's worth either at this point, but pretty good, I guess.
Yeah, we'll talk about that here in a minute, I think, just to kind of recap the whole thing. Anything else on the Sun Bowl here?
The most entertaining of the 3 bowl games that we have to recap tonight, by far.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I would agree with that. Louisville 35, Washington 34. We'll move to the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, the number 14 Ole Miss Rebels 52, Duke 20. And it feels weird to say that it might not have even been that close.
It was bad.
Yeah, Duke. I mean, Duke did their best to try to hang on here. I mean, they scored in the middle of the second quarter to make it 17-7. But that's about as close as it ever was. It ultimately got out to 45-7, and I mean, it just kind of snowballed on them, especially after halftime. So, I mean, this is kind of what we expected. This is an Ole Miss team that had been talking some trash, and their coach had been talking some trash on Twitter, and you figured that they were motivated to not be made a fool of here. And a Duke team that we thought might have been a little bit of fool's gold this year with a 9-3 record coming out of the regular season, and they didn't have their quarterback, and a lot of guys just not there, and so this is ultimately kind of what you get here. I mean, good try for Duke, but this was not really a fair fight to begin with.
No, this was not a fair fight, and I think you and I can both agree when Ole Miss and Duke are both at their best, Ole Miss is still probably at least a 2-score favorite. So, take of that what you will. Obviously, Duke doesn't have Malik Murphy, and that played significantly into the outcome of the game. Malik Murphy obviously was not the only player missing for Duke. A bunch of guys opted out, and Ole Miss basically played all of their important players, right? Like Jackson Dart played. He threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Jordan Watkins had 7 for 180 and 2 scores. He was the best skill position player on the field. This is what you're going to get when you're going against a full-scale, good SEC team, and you're playing basically with a bottom-of-the-barrel roster in the ACC because everybody opted out. This is going to be the bowl result. So I didn't have high hopes for this going in. It was essentially something to watch after the Sugar Bowl because the Sugar Bowl was unexpectedly played on this night for awful reasons, right?
Yeah.
And it was essentially this was supposed to be a standalone game. I would not have watched any of it if it weren't for the Sugar Bowl being on right before it. I got Noah to bed and then popped this on, and it was just kind of on in the background while I was doing some work. And I mean, could have gone better for Duke, but this was basically the expected outcome.
Yep. Yeah, there were some back and forth shenanigans, I guess, with the timing of, I think, this game. And as you mentioned, I mean, the Sugar Bowl getting rescheduled for the horrible occurrence in New Orleans there New Year's morning. And And it was like, I remember when they were first saying they were just going to bump that game back 24 hours, which would have basically coincided with this game. So I think this probably would have become like an afternoon game, but then they ended up bumping the Sugar Bowl up. And so this kind of stayed in its time slot. But again, it was one of those where it didn't take long before you kind of felt like you might be able to tune out of this one. And, you weren't going to get any sort of exciting fireworks of a close game. That's for sure.
It was background noise. Every now and then I looked over and, there's Manny Diaz just kind of with a befuddled look on his face. It's like,
yeah,
I understand you're a football coach, but like this is kind of what you expected, right? I mean, what were your expectations coming in here?
Yep. Ole Miss 52, Duke 20. Anything else there, Mike?
Good. We're good.
And finally, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, Minnesota
God,
24.
I was so drunk for this. Continue.
Your Hokies 10, and probably a good thing you were.
Yeah.
Looked pretty cold there.
Yeah.
Another game that, like, I feel like from watching it, this did not feel like this was only a 2-touchdown game. Like, it just
No.
It felt like there was a lot of futility in what Virginia Tech was doing in this game. You get they opened the scoring. They took a 7-0 lead at the end of the first quarter. They kick a field goal right before halftime, but I mean, it took a lot for Virginia Tech's offense to get anything going in this game. I thought the defense played honorably, kind of kept them in the game, did their best to try to hold Minnesota down, but ultimately it was a little bit too much. This was a combo of William Watson, Pop Watson, and Colin Schlee for Virginia Tech. I mentioned his name on the preview. I was kind of surprised that he showed up. Y'all were pretty dismissive, and then there he is. He scores the go-ahead touchdown to start the game. But yeah, this was, I don't know, a Virginia Tech team that, again, they were kind of without some of their best players, and some of that voluntarily, some of that otherwise, and it just never really felt like a great matchup for a Virginia Tech team that didn't have a lot to play for here.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 of the offensive linemen were like taking their first college snaps here. So get what you get here. The receivers I thought looked pretty good. Like Aiden Green has been basically Virginia Tech's 4th or 5th receiver the first 2 years of his career. Kind of flashed what he can do, 6 for 115. He looked good. He's basically looked good in the role that he's been in for Virginia Tech the last couple seasons, so that was kind of encouraging. The young receivers I thought looked pretty good, right? Like there wasn't a whole lot going on offensively for Virginia Tech, but route running was good. You try to look for like auxiliary stuff in this game in the stands because you're like going in, this is going to be kind of a bloodbath, but like Keelan Adams had the 47-yard reverse. It was kind of fun, and they were trying to manufacture some offense. Pop Watson looked horrible, and like I don't know how much of that you put on Pop and how much you put on that on like the offensive line, just like not knowing the protections. But essentially, like this basically looked like the second half against Duke. Like Pop would make a play here or there, but other than that, it looked like he was not on the same page with the offensive line. He had the first team offensive line with him against Virginia, and Pop played pretty well. So I think just kind of do the math when you kind of flip it back and you're playing with a bunch of first time starters on the offensive line. This is kind of what happens. It looks like the end of the Duke game again. So I don't know how much of that you put on Pop. He did not look very good though, and the offensive line didn't look very good. Virginia Tech couldn't run it at all. I mean, their leading rusher was Keelan Adams off the one reverse that he had, 47 yards rushing. I mean, that's awful. So, Minnesota had Darius Taylor. It was kind of cool to see him in person because he's been a fun guy to watch on TV this year. So seeing him play in person was pretty cool. Brosmer's numbers were pretty indicative of how he played. I didn't think he was very good, but it didn't really matter. Virginia Tech's defense kept him in the game, but they were on the field a ton. So the highlight of this was Scott and I heading over to Andrew's, and Andrew Alex, shout out to him.
Hey, Andrew.
Friend of mine, podcast co-host, and went to his apartment and had a bunch of alcohol, and then went over to the stadium in 25-degree weather, and then went to Charlotte Beer Garden afterwards. So the one story I'll tell on this podcast, Joey, that I think our friends on here listening tonight will enjoy, because everybody knows producer Scott pretty well on here at this point. Everybody who's listening tonight, and it was getting kind of late, right? And I'm going to call in this case like midnight, kind of late, because we had been drinking since 2:00 basically.
Yeah, you'd driven down that morning. I mean, it was a
Drove
long
down
day.
that morning, long day. Drove down that morning. We'd been drinking since the middle of the afternoon in Andrews. We watched a game in the cold, and now we're at Charlotte Beer Garden. We are several beverages deep at this point, and it got to a point at Charlotte Beer Garden where I turned to Scott and I said, "You know what? I think we should get some waters." Which I don't say. Let's just put it this way for the listeners. I'm 32 years old. I have a kid, as everybody knows. I am not drinking like that very often at this point in my life. And there's only a handful of times in my entire life, even in college, where I have proposed getting a water at the bar. And so,
yeah, it's a question of like decision making abilities, and
right.
at that point, usually they're not in their best place.
Yeah. So for me to say, I think we should get a water, that should tell you what kind of shape I was probably in. And I said that to Scott, and Scott agreed, and he said he would go get them. And he came back with 2 IPAs. So that is when we called an Uber and went home. It was time to go back to the hotel at that point.
Yep, closing time.
Shout out Scott. I said, yeah, go grab us some waters. He said, okay, and he brought back 2 IPAs. Yes, let's keep the party rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could foresee what that next morning was going to look like pretty quickly.
Yeah. Early. Yeah. The morning came quickly for Scott. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. No kidding. Well, I mean, first of all, I'm glad y'all had a safe trip. I'm glad y'all had fun.
We did.
I understand why there was that much consumption going on in a game where Virginia Tech had 9 first downs, and
yes, yeah,
you get that. So
yeah, I had more beverages than Virginia Tech had first downs. That's for sure.
But hey, look on the bright side. It was not a 1-score game, and it does not go against that record for.
It's true
for Brent Pry.
You know what? It's silver lining.
Yeah.
Silver lining.
There you go.
Yeah.
Look for the positives.
That's right.
Minnesota 24, Virginia Tech 10. Anything else?
A great end to a disappointing season.
Yeah, there you go. That wraps up bowl season, Mike. And kind of as discussed, the ACC finishes 2-11 here, and obviously that is less than ideal. You'd like to see a few more wins than that and a little bit more of a competitive nature. But I think we kind of talked about it before, but I think especially in my mind right now, there's a lot of these where you're talking about, first of all, you had the 2 playoff games where Clemson and SMU went on the road against 2 teams that were both within 1 score with under 5 minutes left of going to the national title game, right? Like you were underdogs, you weren't expected to win, and those are 2 really, really, really good teams in Texas and Penn State that they lost to. And nobody faults them for losing those games. That's fine. And then you look at a number of them. Cal was playing with like a 4th-string quarterback. Pitt was playing with like a 4th-string quarterback. We'll come back to that. There were a number. North Carolina got down to like their 3rd-string quarterback. So there's definitely some like some context here as well with stuff that was going on with opt-outs and all that, where it's like it's not really a meaningful result. And then you had a number of them that I thought were fairly good games. Teams losing. Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt. That one kind of got sideways on frustration with officiating, but ultimately it was a pretty fair matchup. Iowa State beats Miami in the final minutes. Like that was a close and entertaining game. NC State just needed 1 stop. So it's like a number of these were 1-score game kind of situations, and it sucks to lose them, but it's not like the conference made a total fool of itself, I don't think. It's like they were pretty competitive games, and, sometimes they just don't go your way.
Also, like the way I look at this too is the media can only make so much of the fact that like everybody's opting out and how frustrated they are with like the state of things, right? Because a lot of media members are just like not happy that the bowls have gotten to this point. Like a lot of people who are covering college football full time. But you can't talk about that and then also act like a conference going 2-11 when a number of the bowl games had 1 million opt-outs means something.
Yeah.
Like you can't play both sides of the coin on that. If the ACC had 13 bowl games, we're including, of course, the 2 playoff games here. If the ACC had 13 bowl games where everybody was playing and the ACC finished with a record like this, okay, let's have a conversation. But when we're talking about Duke going up against Ole Miss with all of their backups and all these opt-outs, when we're talking about the Virginia Tech-Minnesota game we just talked about, We're talking about Cal not having their starting quarterback against UNLV. Like, when those are the types of conversations we're having, I have a hard time getting behind the conversation of, oh, the conference went 2-11. This conference sucks.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say bowl games don't mean anything and then talk about this stat like it's a meaningful stat.
Exactly.
So that's my soapbox with this.
Yep.
With that said, bunch of one-score games, absolutely. You play all these games again. I think it's more likely that this is like a situation where the conference goes like 5-8, right? Like I don't think you play these games 10 times. I don't think the ACC is going 2-11 more than like 2 or 3 times with how some of these games went in the fourth quarter in particular.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's as bad as it looks on paper if we're going to like really dive into this. But otherwise, I just think the discussion around it has been ridiculous, like totally ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I don't see meaning from it. And honestly, the only one of these games that I'm like a little bit peeved about the outcome is that Pitt lost to Toledo.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned, I mean, yes, Pitt was mostly playing their fourth string quarterback in that game, and so like expectations can be tempered, tempered a little bit. But like, it was more the coaching decisions from Pat Narduzzi that I am still kind of steamed about. Like, there's no good reason for some of the decisions that he made, and that's what bothers me. It's not really about necessarily the fact that they lost the bowl game or that certain guys weren't playing. It's more like the way that game actually flowed. The coach screwed it up, and that's what bothers me.
Yeah, really dumb. I mean, you score 46 points with your fourth string quarterback against a MAC team, and that should be enough. Like, Toledo's good. Like, Toledo had a good year, but when you're scoring 46 points with your fourth stringer for a majority of the game, that should be enough to beat Toledo with the players you have on your roster that are out there playing. So, really, really annoying outcome. I don't necessarily agree with this entire comment. Like, East Carolina had a pretty good year. UConn had a very good year. Like, I don't think ACC teams, even with like their backups and third string quarterbacks, I don't think necessarily. You got to take these games kind of in each individual, like put them in their individual silos and like discuss them, right? But like, it wasn't just backup quarterbacks. It was offensive linemen. It was skill position players. It was when you get down, especially for these ACC teams, like we're talking about Pitt playing Toledo. We're talking about North Carolina with a interim coaching staff and backups all up and down the roster going up against a good UConn team. We're talking about NC State with a bunch of backups going up against East Carolina. Like, you don't have to go very far down the rosters of some of these teams before you start playing like middle of the road AAC teams or middle of the road MAC teams. And that's just the way that it is, right?
Yeah.
It's just the way that it is in the middle of the ACC. You start getting into second, third stringers, like you're going to be looking like a group of 5 team pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think to Woke Furby's point here in his comment, just for the people listening on audio, in fairness, ACC teams should be able to beat UConn, Toledo, and ECU with third string quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thought is that, well, you've still got ACC quality players in the trenches, right? Like, and you should be able to run the ball and like that kind of thing. But then to your point, Mike, I mean, there's a number of these ACC teams that start the year with maybe like 8 offensive linemen that they feel good playing. And that's before you have injuries, before you have opt-outs, like all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, you talk about the guys going out there for Virginia Tech, getting their first college snaps. I mean, there's still something to that of like, yeah, I realize that the guys across from you play for Toledo or play for ECU, but like, if they've played for a couple of years and they're starters or whatever, I mean, they've got a lot of experience and they know what they're doing more so than you do. And that can really be a big advantage. So it is kind of a full picture thing, I think, of who's playing, but at the end of the day, again, this really shouldn't matter. It's all exhibitions. I will say, I mean, I think this was a really good bowl season in general. I mean, a lot of these games.
Really good.
A lot of these games were competitive. They were fun. It was good. And I think some of that is that we're seeing less opt-outs than maybe we were 2 and 3 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
And I tend to think that it's not a coincidence that that's happening at the same time that like the NIL thing is getting a little bit more structured or a little bit more, like it's less of a just, waving inflatable tube man of just like, yeah, I don't know, just figure it all out and just, I don't know, just throw money around and whatever. Like, I feel like these players are now on deals that it's like they get some of their NIL money for playing the bowl game, probably. And
Yeah.
so it kind of makes sense why they would do that. But,
Yeah.
again,
incentivizes the players for playing in these games at the end of the year, which, by the way, like I never considered that being a thing. Like when all this stuff was happening, I was thinking, oh, NIL, oh, they're going to go to the pros and everybody's just going to keep opting out. Bowl games are meaningless. I never really considered the fact that like these contracts or whatever, these agreements that these kids are signing with schools right now, I never considered that these kids would be incentivized to play in the bowl games. But if that's going to be the case, bowl seasons are going to be awesome from here on out. We're going to get more of how it used to be and less of how it's been lately, which I think would be really good. And, I think some of the top players in the draft who aren't playing in a playoff game, like they probably still will opt out. I mean, you're not going to have a lot of like Shadur Sanders, Travis Hunter situations, I don't think, very often. Those guys just love playing football. And they got huge insurance policies, by the way, for playing in their bowl game.
Yeah, and
so
Cam Ward played, the first half, and Kyle McCord played like their entire bowl game, and and so it's like we're seeing more of those guys. You mentioned Jackson Dart played for Ole Miss, like got guys with some stuff on the line that they're going out there and playing, and I mean credit to them. And again, I think there's some incentive somewhere that's leading them to do that.
For sure. So it's good.
Yep.
It's good. I like it.
2-11. Let's just put that banner away.
We'll put a pin in that. Yeah. Put a pin in that till forever.
Not talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
Mike, bowl season has been brought to you by section103.com. It is the internet's premier place for all things wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. They have t-shirts, they got sweatshirts, they got hoodies, they got hats, things for men, women, children, something for the whole family. Anything you need supporting Georgia Tech in your life, go to section103.com. Use promo code GOACC for 10% off your first order. They've got a number of NIL jerseys available, and they've also got an NIL jersey buyback program for any transfer portal casualties that might happen. So shout out to the Steven and the gang. Everything they use is the official Tech word marks, the official Tech golds. I've been really enjoying this new hat that I got. Looks great. All of them are, I think, snapbacks, and again, they look fantastic. And it's yet another thing of like, these are hard to find is hats that look good that are Georgia Tech hats, and you can find a whole bunch of them over there at section103.com. One more time, use promo code GOACC for 10% off your first order at checkout. Shout out to Steven and the gang. Appreciate their support. Happy New Year to them, and thanks again for another great season supporting the Basketball Conference podcast.
100%.
100%. Let's hit some newsy items, Mike, and then we'll get out of here. Let's start here.
I like the lowercase Georgia there.
Yeah, no, I don't know who did that, but that's crazy, right? Georgia quarterback
can figure out pretty quickly who made the banner.
Yeah, nuts. Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. He goes in the transfer portal. Well, so first of all, he kind of surprised people. People kind of thought there was a decent shot he would just go into the draft.
Yeah.
And then he announces he's going into the transfer portal, and then within like 2 days, he is transferring to Miami. Amazing how fast those things go. But
no tampering there.
Yeah, he's headed to Miami. The reported NIL deals, initially it was around $4 million, and now they're saying somewhere in the $3 million range, maybe a little bit more than Cam Ward was getting, I think.
Too much. But see, that's the problem. That right there is a huge issue. That right there is the issue. Yeah, that's the issue.
Look, maybe, and to some degree, Beck was let down this year by his receivers, and that definitely didn't help things. But like, my eyes tell me Carson Beck downgrade from Cam Ward, and that's assuming he's healthy, by the way.
Yeah, Beck's good. Like, I don't.
Yeah,
he's good. I mean,
not
he's
bad,
a good
but
player.
he's not going to New York for the Heisman ceremony.
Right. Yeah. There's nuance to the conversation. He's good, but he's not like and he's never been this way. Put the team on your back, throw for 500 by yourself, and the entire offense can be run through you, which is what Cam Ward was at times this year. particularly in the second half of several games where he pulled Miami out of the mud. I don't think Beck's going to do that, right? I think Beck, a lot of play action, that sort of thing. Beck killed some teams this year. Like, you think about the second half against Alabama in particular. Like, he like throttled down and was very good in the second half of that Alabama game early in the year. And it was a big reason why they got back into the game. He's not going to do that all the time. And he hasn't. He doesn't have a track record doing that. That's not him. That's not who he is. Ward has had that reputation everywhere he's been. Brian Johns, Ward was getting around $1.6 million per The Athletic. If you're paying Beck double that, I think that's a problem. Now, that might have just been the going rate to try to get him, and Miami has a quarterback problem going into next year. So market kind of dictates that too, you know. You can't just look at it and be like, all right, well, I mean, you paid double and you're not getting Cam Ward, so like, what'd you really invest in? But also, if you're Miami and you're looking at the team you're bringing back and you don't have a quarterback, you're like, all right, well, we're going to have to get one of those. So now you have to overpay for Carson Beck. It could not be me. Like, it could not be me. Now, Beck is probably one of the best quarterbacks on the market if he's healthy. The issue is he's having elbow surgery.
Yeah.
So what is he going to be?
I assume that's Tommy John, but, you know.
I don't know. I mean, if it is, like, is he going to be ready in the fall? I know Tommy John for a quarterback is different than Tommy John for a pitcher, like the recovery time and that sort of thing. It's a different injury for a quarterback versus a guy throwing 90 miles per hour, right?
Well, it helps, that he's not trying to snap off 3,400 RPM curveballs or anything like that.
Right.
You know, like,
right.
I think it's a little bit of a faster recovery, but I feel like what I've been hearing is I don't think he's expected to be ready to throw until like June. So he's going to miss spring camp of all those reps. And then I guess you get like 3 weeks at the end of summer, and that's your prep. I mean, obviously you'll be able to be on campus to like be part of install and like watch film and learn the offense, like that kind of thing. But like
record TikToks with the Cavender twins.
Right. Most importantly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm already sick of them.
Yeah.
But, that whole storyline we're doing.
Man, a guy looks like him. He must be nice being a quarterback because. Anyways.
Yeah. I just advise whatever Cavender twin he's dating. I don't even remember which one it is. I just advise her to make sure he's not on Snapchat too often, from what I've seen. just keep tabs on that. Is what I would What I would advise. Yeah, bonk is right. Bonk is right. Just keep an eye on that. But
you can do worse than Carson Beck here, but like, again, I think this is a step back from Cam Ward. And I mean, we talked about it. Cam Ward like carried that team this year and kind of willed them to win numerous games.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Beck is quite that guy. I mean, I think he's got all the physical tools, but there's just a number of games I've seen him play where it's like, he's not that hard to fool he's not that hard to confuse and get him seeing ghosts. And, you know, like, I don't know. He's fine. He's good. He'll be one of the, top half of the ACC quarterbacks probably,
I think that the team is going to have to play more consistently next year with Beck at quarterback than they did with Ward, right? Like, Xavier Restrepo was incredible this year for Miami, was really, really good. Miami just as a whole, though, they were very inconsistent, and it led to Ward having to kind of pull him out of the muck a lot. I just think that Miami is going to have to be a more consistent four-quarter football team with Carson Beck at quarterback. It doesn't mean that they can't be really good. Doesn't mean they can't contend in the ACC with him. That's not what I'm saying. I just think that if you put yourself in a situation where you're down in the fourth quarter by a score multiple times, and you're relying on Beck to pull you out of it multiple times, I think he'll do it a couple times. I don't know if he'll do it as much as Cam Ward did, and that's going to be the difference for Miami next year between 10 wins and like 7 wins. Right. So I just think they got to be more consistent, right? I mean, how many times did we sit here this year and talk about how this Miami team was probably a 7-5 team without Cam Ward? And he was a Heisman finalist for a reason. And I understand Carson Beck was like a preseason Heisman guy, like getting a lot of hype. Yeah. And he didn't turn into that guy because a lot of reasons. He wasn't as good as people thought. the team around him wasn't as good at Georgia this year. The receivers were not consistent as we saw in the Sugar Bowl. Like that they let down Gunnar Stockton too. Like that's just kind of what they did this year. They could not run the ball at all, and that was an issue all season long. Beck is a play action quarterback and didn't benefit from that.
Yeah.
So maybe some stuff is upgraded in that regard. I just think Miami's going to have to be more consistent next year. Beck's a good player. He's not Cam Ward level, in my opinion, as a college quarterback. Maybe he has a better pro ceiling than Ward. I don't know. We'll see post-injury. But there also wasn't a quarterback out there like Cam Ward that Miami could go out and get. Like, who is that guy that's going to... Like, Beck is kind of the name on the market. Like, Quinn Ewers is declaring for the draft, as far as we know, unless he gets like a big NIL bag somewhere. But, like, would you rather have Beck or Ewers? It's probably a coin flip. So there's not really, like, that guy out there this time around. There's not.
Right.
So this is basically you do what you can do.
Yeah. I think Brian Johns brings up a good point. I think part of some of this might be that Miami is running out of players who have experience beating Georgia Tech. And so that's an upside here is you get somebody who has done that. So that's kind of nice for him. Although Nuke Jacket mentions that they don't even play Georgia Tech next year with a new scheduling model. So fantastic. Only other thing I'll say, and this is not really necessarily specific to this situation as much as kind of where we're at with Power 4 college football at large, is are we developing quarterbacks anymore? Or are we just finding transfers? Because
we're going to find out after the national championship game when we see what Notre Dame decides to do. Because if they go transfer again with fringe 5-star quarterback CJ Carr on the roster, I think that tells you probably everything you need to know about how big programs are valuing young quarterbacks, because it does feel like there's a propensity to bring in transfers at these huge programs, right? Doesn't it feel that way?
It's like all anybody's doing.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me. Like, because again, you have these like really high end guys, and I don't know. It's crazy to me that you're letting these high end guys like Louisville. Pierce Clarkson was like a high 4-star level quarterback. Like he was a really high caliber prospect. He's basically never played for Louisville because they had to go get Jack Plummer and Tyler Shuck.
Yep.
And now Miller Moss. And it's like, what, are we just ignoring the young guys in development? Because then what happens when all these older guys that have some experience, they're all going to age out? Like that day's coming, and then what?
Or they won't. I mean, we're doing that junior college transfer rule now, and Diego Pavia is playing his like 15th year of college football next year. He's like the better version of Cam Rising at Utah. This guy just keeps earning eligibility. And instead of saying, get him out of here, we're like, give us more Pavia because he's exciting to watch. Versus Cam Rising, it's like this guy's never on the field, and like he keeps getting eligibility. How does this keep happening?
Yep. Other piece of news we had, Mike, Kyle McCord was, speaking of extending eligibility, he was kind of going back and forth. It seemed like there were rumors that he might be trying to extend it. I forget if there were actual stories or quotes or anything, but he did officially declare for the NFL draft, so he will be gone. Syracuse is going to have to replace him going into next year. He's a guy that I think showed a lot of upside this year, and I don't think he's going to be a first-round kind of pick, but, he's a very intriguing, like, second to third round kind of prospect, maybe. A guy with a live arm. He had a high pedigree coming out of high school. A guy that somebody's going to take a swing on, and they might be rewarded for it.
I feel like he is a middle-of-the-round draft guy like Kirk Cousins, and could end up being a guy who plays a lot of football in the NFL like a Kirk Cousins. McCord's got all the arm talent. He makes a lot of dumb decisions, which is fine, but he did cut down on the turnovers this year, and I think he showed the upside there. So it's a weak quarterback class. I think McCord could probably sneak into one of the first 5 quarterbacks taken. I don't think that's too crazy to say. I think he's in a draft that has Shadur and God knows what else at quarterback. I mean, Ewers, I guess, is coming out, and a few others. Like, I don't know, man. Feel like he has a shot. It'll be interesting. Yep.
Yeah, it will be. And I mean, a couple of the folks in the chat asking what does Syracuse do now with him gone? And I don't know the answer to that. And I'd hope, I don't know. I think Woke Furby probably knows something. I think he's a Syracuse guy, but he was a big deal for that team. And then Dennis makes the point. Couldn't you say the same thing about him as you said about Cam Ward, where he was a big reason that they won a lot of their games? And I noticed that early in the year when they played Georgia Tech, Kyle McCord got hot and was just like unstoppable in that game.
Oh,
and he did that a few times this year. And obviously he had the one really bad night against Pittsburgh. But other than that, I mean, he had some nights that he would just take over the game. And that's not something that just anybody can do. And so it'll be curious to see, kind of what Syracuse ends up doing there and if they can get someone who can replicate that.
Yeah. I think we probably should have talked more this year. I mean, we did talk consistently about how good McCord was, but I don't think we talked about in the context of he's doing a lot of the stuff Ward was doing at Miami. I think that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We will see. That's a big piece of the reason that they end up 10-3 this year. And so finding someone who's, nearly that good is not an automatic thing, as we're kind of already talking about with Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers and some of those. So we will see.
Reasonably speaking, probably take a step back next year if you don't figure out quarterback. But I mean, Fran Brown, really, really good year one. So as long as they make a bowl game and look competitive next year, trajectory at that program is trending up quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Last little bit of news we had some coordinator changes here, and we don't have answers on all of these necessarily yet. So we won't, go too long on this, but Clemson fires Wes Goodwin, their defensive coordinator. That was something that we talked about was a possibility, and a defense that, as mentioned, I mean, it's not like it's been bad, but it's definitely not as good as it was a few years ago under Brent Venables. And so they end up moving on. They have not announced a hire, to my knowledge, and there's a lot of speculation around Jim Leonard, who was a former, I think he was defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. Yeah. Is he defensive coordinator or just like an assistant for the Broncos right now? But
just an assistant.
But that's a guy, if you can get him, that's a win. That's a definite upgrade, I think, at defensive coordinator, one of the best in the game. That would be huge if they can pull that off. As we do this show, Mike, I mean, we're hours removed from the Broncos season ending. So everyone kind of assumed that it would have to wait for that if it is going to be Jim Leonard. And so we'll see. But if it is going to be him, I would expect something here in the next 2 to 3 days to be announced. So we will see about that.
Yeah. Yep, definitely.
Miami moves on from their defensive coordinator. Why is his name escaping me? Hang on. This is good podcasting.
Lance Guidry.
Lance Guidry. That's right. Lance Guidry. He was relieved of his duties. He's going to be replaced by the defensive coordinator, Mike, that you just saw in Charlotte, Minnesota's defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman.
Upgrade.
I can't say that I know a whole lot about him, but I mean, Minnesota's never been a slouch on defense.
Upgrade. Yeah. One of the best defenses in the Big Ten. Upgrade.
Yep. So we'll see. I mean,
in theory, upgrade.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. Miami's defense is like a whole ball of wax, I feel like, of high talent and production that never quite matches it. And so I don't know, maybe it is a defensive coordinator issue, but maybe not. I don't know. We'll have to find out and see what he's able to do as he gets into position here. He spent last year at Minnesota. Before that, linebackers at Rutgers for a couple of years, defense coordinator at James Madison. And then before that, really he's only been at the FBS level since 2019. So pretty early in his career and pretty young, but clearly kind of an up and comer. He's been jumping from job to job every 2 or so years. So we'll see. Could be a win for Miami.
Could be. Hey, by the way, we're about to talk about NC State. I don't know what the hell they're doing. Like, this was uninspiring by Doran. So that's a quick soapbox for me. I'll cede the floor to you.
Yeah, I mean, he fires Robert Anae, their offensive coordinator. I mean, that was a hire that he made a couple years ago with a lot of hype around it, and that did not pan out well at all.
I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with making that change. Offensive.
In his place, he promotes Kurt Roper, who was his quarterback's coach. I want to say he was a Cutcliffe guy. I
Yeah,
think he
that
spent some
sounds
time.
that sounds right. That
I think
sounds
he spent
right.
some time with Duke under Cutcliffe, and then he was also he might have been the offensive coordinator for, was it Muschamp at Florida, or was it someone at Florida? Hang on, he was there. Yeah, 2014. That was probably Muschamp.
Yeah.
Um, and then he's kind of wandered around for a while, but he's been with NC State since 2019. So a guy who's finally going to get that promotion to offensive coordinator that he hasn't filled that role in a while. So we'll see how that goes. Defensive coordinator Tony Gibson.
Correct. Gibson.
Tony Gibson. Okay, Florida State hired Tony White out of Nebraska. NC
Yep.
State loses Tony Gibson to Marshall.
Correct. You
Okay.
nailed it this time. We
Name
screwed
that
it up.
Tony.
We screwed it up last podcast. You nailed it this one.
Name that Tony. Let's go.
Name
They
that Tony.
replace him with DJ Elliott, who was linebackers for the Eagles. He's been a defensive coordinator for Temple and Kansas and Colorado and Kentucky. And my goodness, a lot of this is not particularly inspiring defenses. And
Yeah.
I wasn't in the room. I don't know nothing about nothing, but interesting here for Dave Doran at this moment that this is the name that he's going with his defensive coordinator. And I mean, Dave is kind of his own defensive coordinator anyways, I'd imagine.
Right. Well, yeah. I am selling my Dave Doran NC State stock. I'm out. I am out.
I think Dave might be out too.
I think so. I long way to go in the offseason. We'll talk about it. We'll probably do a show late next summer with Tony, and we'll have a discussion with Tony Siracusa about coaching changes, and that'll be the question. About a round table like it always is.
Yeah.
I think Doran's going to be on the list, Joey. I think he's going to be on the list.
I could see it. I mean, again, I'm looking at the list. I mean, every game that Bill Belichick coaches is a gift for North Carolina. He could be out at any moment.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would agree.
And then we've mentioned Doran and Pat Narduzzi could also very much be guys that just say, to hell with this, I don't need this, and walk away.
Yep.
I think those are probably the only three, maybe Bill O'Brien, but that's more of like a, if he gets offered an NFL job kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he would just up and leave college football because he's so fed up with everything. So, but
yeah,
there's a couple of those guys that very much could at any moment.
Yeah, and then there are a bunch of guys who are like, probably not enough money or time, sort of thing. We'd rather not fire him unless it's really bad.
Right. Exactly.
Like this next guy. Like this next guy we'll talk about.
Yeah. Virginia Tech has not yet hired Anthony Poindexter.
They have not, which, I mentioned this on our last podcast. I could tell you with certainty they have talked to Anthony Poindexter and there was mutual interest. But Penn State season has been over for, enough time, as we're sitting here recording on Sunday night, enough time that it would take to, that's plenty of time to go ahead and hire him if he's the guy.
Yep.
And I'm not saying he's not the guy, but it doesn't make you feel very good that they haven't closed that deal yet.
Right.
So maybe we hear something Monday morning. I don't know, but
Chris Marv that he would be replacing, by the way.
Chris Marv that he would be replacing. And you would think that it's taken Virginia Tech so long to hire a defensive coordinator that if it's not Poindexter, it's probably an assistant on a college or NFL staff that is participating in the playoffs. And I don't know. I mean, the two names, one was like a fan name, was Nick Sorensen, who played at Virginia Tech, was just fired as Kyle Shanahan's defensive coordinator with the Niners. That was a name thrown around. Pretty limited on college coaching experience there in terms of hasn't been a coordinator. Poindexter has at least been a co-DC with Tom Allen at Penn State. I would like that hire more. We'll see. Yeah. But you gotta, I mean, if you're Pry, you gotta nail this. I mean, Bud Foster's going to be some sort of quality control analyst or something next year.
I was basically just about to say, he does still live in Blacksburg, doesn't he?
He does. He is. Pry said before the bowl game that he was going to be helping him out moving forward. I think that's more of like an advisor type please help me sort of thing. Please help. Which is interesting because I'm wondering why maybe he wasn't helping Chris Marv out that much. I heard rumors that, I don't know how true these are, but I heard some rumors that, Foster's office, because he's still got an office in like the stadium because he does stuff with the athletic department.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that his office was right down the hall from Chris Marv's, the defensive coordinator, and Marv like didn't ask him a lot of questions. It's like, I feel like that's a guy you should talk to if he's still in the building,
Yeah, worth picking his brain.
Yeah. So that was I've heard that. So I don't know, we'll see.
We will see. We'll keep you updated as those situations kind of continue to resolve themselves. Obviously, much more to come here in the offseason. Still could be some more coordinator changes. I mean, I don't anticipate anyone getting hired away at this point necessarily, but still got one more game to play. Ohio State, Notre Dame playing for the national title game. We'll talk about that here real quick. That is going to be Monday night. That is in Atlanta at the Big Body Benz, as it were. Ohio State, an 8.5-point favorite. Total's 45.5. I'm gonna say Ohio State here to cover. I certainly think Ohio State wins. Notre Dame, to me, does not have enough on offense to keep up here. And I think if there is a path to win for Notre Dame, it's like I don't feel like Notre Dame is like even really capable of scoring more than like 21 points on this Ohio State defense. So like, you got to really try to drag this down into a rock fight, shorten the game, and ugly it up. And that's, I think, your path to victory here if you're Notre Dame.
Grew up a huge Notre Dame fan, didn't get into school there, ended up at Virginia Tech. I think most of you have been listening to this podcast for a long time to know that about me. I do not think Notre Dame has a very good chance in this game at all. I think what it really takes is Notre Dame's been really good at taking the football away this year. I think they're going to have to do that. Will Howard will throw it to you, right? So I don't think it's impossible to imagine Notre Dame forcing a turnover or two here to get themselves a short field. I think they're going to have to convert any short field opportunities they do get into touchdowns, not field goals. It's a groundbreaking analysis, but this is Ohio State's got a top 3 defense, and Notre Dame is better at scoring in the red zone than Texas is. Obviously, Texas is one of the worst teams in the Power 4 in red zone offense. That showed up late, obviously, in that game in the Cotton Bowl. Notre Dame's really good in the red zone. They have a good red zone team. And I think when you have a good red zone team on offense and a elite red zone defense, I think that's where the game could be won or lost if you're the underdog. So just keep an eye on that. Situational football. I think it's an under game. I think Notre Dame has the capability of doing to Jeremiah Smith what Texas just did. I think their secondary is good enough. I think the pass rush is good enough. I just think Ohio State's got too many playmakers on offense. I think they do hit on one or two big plays here and win the game. This game opened around 10. It's down to 8.5. I think it'll get bet down to like maybe 7.5, 8 at best. If you're on the Ohio State side and you're looking to kind of get the juice there, I already bet Notre Dame plus 9.5. I think they do ugly it up. I do think this is an under game. I got under 46.5, which I felt pretty good about. It's already come down a point, so come down a point in the spread and the total. Feel pretty good about that value. It's really good to be me, Joey, because I made those bets I just mentioned, but I also am holding an Ohio State plus 400 ticket that I purchased to win the national title that I purchased in August. So
it's good value.
I'm going to be winning a bet no matter what.
There you go.
A week from Monday. So
attaboy. Yeah.
So selfishly, as a Notre Dame fan, would love to see them pull it off and just win less money. That'd be great. But not feeling particularly good about this one. I think Notre Dame's looked really good. They play really hard for Freeman. I just don't think they have quite enough on offense. This is just an unbelievable Ohio State roster. And Notre Dame has been really, really good all year. The Northern Illinois game feels like just the biggest aberration of all time when you consider who Notre Dame's beaten to get to this point and the types of teams they've beaten and how they've looked in those games. Like Penn State was basically better Georgia, and Notre Dame figured it out. And Notre Dame, and I know it was kind of a high variance with the special teams, but they figured it out against Georgia and won that game pretty convincingly with how they played defensively. So, you deserve to be there. Obviously, you deserve to be there. You were the best team on that side of the bracket, and felt that way going into it, feel that way coming out of it. Ohio State's really good. It's just, I think it's Ryan Day's time, Joey. I do. I think it's Ryan Day's time.
Feels that way. And when you allegedly spend $20 million on a roster, it had damn well better be your time. So,
yeah, it better be.
I'm going to land with Ohio State. I'm going to take the under 45.5, and I'm going to take the under Notre Dame team total. I think the implied score here is something like 26.5 to 18.5. I'm going to say Notre Dame does not quite get to 18.5. And I don't know that Ohio State fully blows them out, but I could see something like 27 to 16, or I just don't.
10.
Yeah, I just don't see Notre Dame getting a full 21 points or anything in this game, and so I'll take my chances that they go under. But I assume the number is going to be like 18.5. Usually it's based on the implied score. So, yeah, I'll say they're stuck at 17 or less.
Weirdly, I think if this game gets into a shootout, I think it tells you more about Ohio State than it does about Notre Dame, because that would be, I think, it's funny because I think that favors Ohio State with the offensive weapons they have. But I think if Notre Dame, the longer you let Notre Dame hang around, I think the worse off you are. And with the way Ryan Day has gotten himself into some games this year,
stranger things have happened.
The right team better show up, because it feels like the same Notre Dame team has showed up since the second week of September after that Northern Illinois loss. It feels like it's just pretty much been, we're going to beat the shit out of everybody, and that's pretty much the team that's been there. So Ohio State better have the right team show up here.
If Penn State is better Georgia, is Notre Dame better Michigan?
Oh yeah. Which
I'll leave that one right there.
Which I've made that comparison. So yep, they are Michigan with the passing game. That's what they are.
We need to get a prop bet going. This is the last thing I have, and then I'm good to get out of here.
Yeah, for sure.
If Notre Dame wins this game, do we get a tweet from the ACC claiming a national championship for the league?
Congratulations to ACC basketball member and former ACC football member Notre Dame.
ACC football participant Notre Dame.
Yes, correct. Nearly won the conference title that year. On winning the national title. And we'll have all the
I can't wait.
It would destroy the Notre Dame should join a conference narrative, which is dumb to begin with. I have thoughts on that, but save for another time.
Yeah, we'll get into that another night. It's late, and I need to work on getting out here quickly, I think. So let's do that.
Let's do that.
All right, Ohio State, I think for me, you got Notre Dame to cover, but I think we kind of both see a little bit of a rock fighty, low scoring kind of situation for a national title game. So hopefully it's competitive and fun rock fight, and not like hard to watch kind of rock fight. So
yeah, make it worth my time.
Mike, that's all I got tonight. Anything else before we work on getting out of here?
Nope.
Come find us on Twitter at FTRSJoey, at Mike McDaniel SI, together at BC Podcast ACC. Keep it tuned here, youtube.com/@the-ACC Football Podcast. We're going to have some more content coming your way. We swear we've been talking about it for like a month now. Work has been pretty bonkers, I think, for the both of us, and the holidays and everything else, but I think everything's kind of starting to settle down a little bit. So keep it tuned here. We'll try to get you some postseason, some kind of post-mortem situations for some of these teams. A lot of content throughout the offseason. So we will continue to go, certainly not at the frequency that you're used to, maybe if you just started with us this season, but once a couple times a month at least is kind of the goal, and hopefully more than that. Just kind of depends on what comes up and what news we have to talk about. So keep it tuned here. Basketball Conference Podcast at gmail.com is the email address. Thank you. Where else on the social medias, Mike?
Facebook.com/basketball conference, rate, review, find some of our podcasts there. youtube.com/@the-ACC Football Podcast. Please subscribe. We are going to start with our season recaps. Already reaching out to people to get those going. I already know I got to find a new Syracuse person, Joey, because we lost Emily to the Minnesota Vikings beat in the middle of the season. So that's a bummer.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. Jumping beats for a team that is going into the playoffs. That's got to be quite the whiplash effect, I would imagine.
Could not be us, but
yeah.
Good for her.
Nobody's
Good for
calling
Emily.
me to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Good for Emily.
She's better than we are.
That's absolutely the case. Yes. That's 1,000% the case.
Mike, anything else?
I am texting Scott the timestamps. So
there you go. I bet he'll love that.
He will. He will.
Shout out to the people in the chat. Really appreciate you all joining us here tonight. Again, a Sunday night as the season is kind of wrapped up. We had a lot of fun with the folks in the comments. So thank you. Thank you. Please, once again, hit the subscribe button if you have not already. We would really, really appreciate that. Mike, you want to come back and keep rolling through the offseason?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Until next time, for Mr. Mike McDaniel, I am Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you again very, very soon. Until next time, go ACC.